somewhere along here says start. Okay, so I want to welcome everybody to tonight's class on Halloween. I know a number of you are still passing out treats or tricks for the kids. And for those who have shown up, welcome. And for those who haven't, you may be viewing this for the future. We're going to be talking about fasting for your health. It's a topic which may not sound very exciting to you because most of us associate fasting with hunger and pain, and we wouldn't want to do that, but you may learn to kind of expand your thoughts a little bit on the topic after we get done with tonight's session. So before we actually get to the speaker, I'm going to show you a few issues. I'm going to share my screen, then we're going to see if anybody has any questions. So I'm going to start off by sharing the screen. And what could I possibly share with you that might be of some interest to you all? So let's start out with lifestyle medicine. So here is a picture that Scott Wagnon, Misty and Kristen and Lisa Chick sent to me. They're all in, I believe, Colorado at this lifestyle medicine conference. They didn't go as a group. They all made an independent decision and wound up meeting each other there. So it's pretty amazing. 3 providers from Eugene, plant-based providers, and 1 medical student from Western University of Health Sciences in Pomona, California. So the med student with the other providers is pretty exciting. And they told me I have to come to one of these sessions one of these times, and maybe I will. The second thing that I wanted to share with you is dinner, my dinner on Halloween. So let's take a look at my dinner on Halloween. And as you may see, there is this little pumpkin looking thing that my wife spent hours in the kitchen. Christine did some cooking today. I mean, she was in the kitchen all afternoon. What did she make? She had me cut off the top of a pumpkin and cut it into 4 slices. She took out the seeds and cut up the pumpkin and made pumpkin soup. It was a pretty magnificent soup. The granddaughter and her boyfriend liked it a lot. I liked it a lot. And then we got this treat. This was my granddaughter's idea. It was grab a bell pepper, make a face, and stuff it. What would you stuff it with? You'd stuff it with quinoa and lentils and spices. And let me tell you, my mouth is watering as I'm telling you about this. You don't have to like the bell pepper, but if you like it, it goes along very well with this. If you didn't like it, the stuffing was pretty magnificent, along with a salad. And for dessert, it's kind of like grapes. There you have dinner for us on Halloween. Took a lot of time that my wife spent making this, but it's kind of a fun little treat. I thought she'd get a kick out of it. All right, I'm going to stop the share there. And I want to stop the whole thing for a moment and go back and see if there's any new people in class tonight who've not been to these classes, and I don't see anybody. So Lynn.
Yeah,
Hello,
I'm
Lynn.
new. This is my first time.
Oh, this is your first time? Well, welcome. How did you hear about the classes?
Well, through the doctor.
He actually gave
My-
you a flyer or something like that?
Yeah.
Nice.
Um, I was asking him about the Mediterranean diet, and this is what he gave me. I I didn't know if this was the right class for what I'm looking for, or
Well,
I mean, is it a vegetarian
well, let me tell
diet?
you, this class potentially is the right class. You get to take what you like from this class, use what you feel is valuable, do your own resource search, make your own choices. There's no policeman. We don't give tickets. We don't belittle anybody or judge anybody. We just share what we see as the science of the healthiest eating choices. You make the decision what you choose to eat. And uh, I would say that there's a spectrum of eating from animal products to plant products, animals to plants. The Mediterranean is somewhere maybe 90% plant and maybe 10-15% animal. We go all the way for those people who are having health issues, that they're trying to reverse diabetes, they're trying to get off of their high blood pressure pills, they're trying to improve their health in the best fashion. And we have found that the people who do mainly all plants are able to achieve success. The Mediterranean diet is a whole lot better than the standard American diet, but from my experience, it doesn't provide as many health benefits as has been demonstrated. There's 2 studies in the world literature that actually demonstrate unclogging of the heart arteries for people with heart disease. And only a totally whole food plant-based diet has been shown to do that. So if that's one of your goals, like you're having heart issues or whatever it might be, then that would be a good thing to do. But if not, you can still do a Mediterranean diet and follow the science and eat whatever you want to eat. Um, so are you following the Mediterranean diet because a friend did it, or because it's going to provide you with um, feel better, more energy?
Feel better, lose weight, more energy. I have a lot of pain issues, back, legs, feet, whatever. And so I'm gaining weight because of the lack of movement, and the love of food.
Yeah.
And so, we just talked about different things, and one, of course, to try to keep moving, which I am in the water, do exercises in the water, but he suggested PT and a couple other things. And then I asked him actually about the Mediterranean diet. From my background, my ancestry, I should be on the Mediterranean diet.
Okay. Yeah, and for those people who live in Mediterranean areas like um, Sardinia, um, there's I is it Icaria? One is in Greece, one is in Italy. Those people are doing this from the time they're kids, little kids. They do it their whole life and they get by just fine. But when you're living in the US of A, you're eating a diet of a meat and sweets that is clogging your arteries, leading to inflammation, causing the chronic pain. And if you've been doing this for a long enough period of time and you want to reverse it, you could do the Mediterranean and it might work. But if it doesn't, then you might want to choose the whole food plant-based and see if that does it. And what I'm talking about is doing it for a couple months. And it's not something that you get addicted to unless you're having good benefit. Then that it's been addicting to me because I started this 12 years ago. I was 63 when I started, but I've seen people who started eating different choices in their 80s. One lady in her 90s after she had a heart attack. There may be someone in the class who has an answer. Have you had any issues with pain that were improved? Have you had any weight loss in the time that you've been attending classes? And do you see this as being restrictive and it's something that's horrible, or is it something that you've learned to actually like I have?
Mhm.
So there's Ads iPhone just unmuted. So let's see what Ads has to say. You're unmuted, so you can speak. Maybe it's an issue with the microphone. Anyway, welcome, Lynn. Come to the classes. If you don't like coming to class, you can go online at livelifestylemedicine.com and you can watch the archive sessions and make a decision as to whether this is something that would be valuable for you. And I'm going to take you there next while Ad is trying to figure out how to actually speak. He or she is connecting the audio. So I'm going to share the screen one more time, and we'll be back. I'm going to show you how to access some additional information from tonight's talk. You go to livelifestylemedicine.com. Do you see this here? www.livelifestylemedicine.com. And if you scroll through the page, you can see there is a tutorial, a website tutorial about halfway down the page. You can watch that. The recordings for the previous week are here. And then for today, I wanted to share with you a resource. And the resource goes something like this. We go to the handouts from the class, and we're looking at fasting infographic. This is from the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. So this fasting for weight loss is something that may be new to you, or it may be old, but if it's new, you can look at this. There are different kinds of fasting, from calorie restriction to alternate day fasting. There's fasting mimicking, there's time restricted feeding. There are all these different possibilities that you could choose from. There's advantages and disadvantages to each of those types of fasting. And you will learn tonight that there are reasons that you may want to fast, and that it's not as horrible as you can imagine or you have imagined. There are reasons never to fast, which you can see documented here. And you can not only eat a healthier diet, but you could fast initially to get you jump started. Your food tastes a lot better when you fasted for a couple days or a day or two. And then you can download the PDF here, print it out, and look at it as you want. Again, the way you get to this is you go to livelifestylemedicine.com, our website, you go to the resources, you go to the handouts, and I hope that is enough to kind of stimulate your interest in this topic. And I'm gonna stop the share now. Is there anybody who has anything they'd like to add about what's going on with their life? Any problems, any questions you have? You know, it's free. We don't charge anything. We're not selling anything. We're here to help you achieve your goals. We have a couple medical students who will help counsel you for free. They talk with you either by phone or they talk with you by Zoom, whatever you prefer, to help coach you on some of your food choices, on some of your difficulties, particularly like, geez, I've got this sweet addiction I cannot get rid of, and it's just doing me in. What can I do? They have had experience in talking with a number of people from the classes. And so I encourage you to think about that. So I don't know, you had your phone on muted for a while. It's muted right now. If you have a question, you can hop on, or anyone else who has anything they want to say. Edward, fire away. Just unmute first.
Okay, now I should be.
There you go.
Um, so the problem I've been having is at work. I work at a pizza parlor. They will occasionally put things in the break room that are just for any employees to just grab and eat. And it's usually pizza or breadsticks covered in butter or something. And I usually abstain. And I try to eat a lot before I go to work, just because of that. But lately, I've just been indulging.
Yeah, that was a common problem for me when I first got started. I was 63 years old, working in the emergency department, eating every cookie, brownie, sweet treat that was put in the break room. Could have been I just ate a big meal and I was filled up, but boy, let me tell you, I was craving anything that was sweet. And then I made the decision to really take this seriously. I had a goal, and that was to keep my wife from having a bypass procedure. And um, I'm only repeating this story because everybody hasn't heard it. I know you have. Uh, she had a very strong family history of heart attacks, and she was next in line. And I decided I really needed to do this for her, and I was gonna just do it. And so when I filled myself up before I went to work, the nurses tried to tempt me. Why don't you have a donut? Why don't you have a brownie? I made some cookies, and I just had a reason not to be eating anything but healthy food. And then as time went on, I just stuck with that. I kept focusing on what's the reason? Why am I doing this? I'm doing this for my wife. I don't know if I'd have done that for myself. And that is one of the problems. If you're dealing with just yourself, sometimes it's difficult and it's easy to lose willpower. And you know, the food is so addicting. And pizza itself, it breaks down into casomorphine. It's a morphine-like substance, the cheese, as it breaks down, and that's highly addicting. So if you're going to intermittently partake, I found that to be didn't work for me because I had no power over my willpower. And it was just easier to use the word poison when I saw something that I knew I shouldn't eat. it just popped into my head. That's poison. I am not going to poison my body. That's all there is to it. I know it tastes good, but I know it's poison for me. And that has seemed to work. Doesn't work for everybody, I'd imagine. I don't know if it would work for you. You don't need to beat up on yourself. But I also noticed another thing. Once I had been eating more fruit and vegetables and whole grains and legumes, I was getting nutrients, vitamins, minerals, plant nutrients that I hadn't been getting before. And I lost a lot of that craving for the sweets pretty early on. The most difficult time for me was the first 2, 3 months. And then, but then I stuck with it. I didn't intermittently have foods that would tempt me. And that's what keeps me kind of on the track right now. I just only eat foods that I know are healthy. Anybody else had this issue of, Kevin, or did you raise your hand, or are you just moving it around because you need to, or anyone else?
I have had this before. I made my dietary switch, Edward, when I was working at a bar and grill, sitting over a fryer every day. And so I know that feeling. I remember saying I wouldn't make the change because of the bacon behind me and the cheese. But it really, to me, I can echo some of the things Dr. Ross said, but I'll try to give you some other avenues of perspective, which were Dr. Ross is coming at it from the health side. I had health reasons, but I also found it much more easy to fortify myself. I typed into the chat here, motivation equals reasons times knowledge. You probably have some knowledge as to why you want to implement the diet. But the motivation will keep growing the more we can be aware of our reasons. And I often found that the reasons were the thing I forgot. And so for the animals was helpful. I don't know if you have that component. You could watch a documentary called Earthlings. And for the environment, you can watch things like Cowspiracy or Seaspiracy to tie that factor in. And then the health side of things, we've got the whole literature that you've probably been exposed to here. But having that kind of more broad base of why you're doing this thing for yourself, as Dr. Ross said, outside of yourself, then for the planet, for the animals. And honestly, also, Edward, I did try a tactic kind of in neuro-linguistic programming on myself because honestly, it was pizza. I did it with pizza and I did it with a chocolate chip cookie, but I took that slice of pizza from work, and I brought it into the bathroom. I don't know if you sell pizza, the bathroom's not great. So take the pizza into the bathroom. I put it in the urinal and just associated that imagery with the pizza. And it was really disgusting because was normally a good smelling pizza. It was now associated with ammonia and urine and hairs. It was disgusting. Like, it wasn't an appealing pizza anymore. So whatever you can kind of do to conjure up those negative aspects. One of the things I also used for myself, because pizza, I was growing up in Wisconsin, so cheese was an issue making this transition. Do you know what the acceptable amount of pus per cup of milk is?
Oh, yeah, too much.
Yeah, don't worry, they pasteurize it, they cook it. So I mean,
Right.
as long as it's sterile pus, right? It's not a big deal.
Right,
Anyway, that's disgusting to me. So when I recognize that I'm eating like a full dropper full of pus per cup is what's allowed for sale, like that's pretty disgusting to be eating that much pus on a pizza. So anyway, hope that helps a little bit.
Thank you.
Yeah. Say hello to Eureka. I don't see her there.
She's right down here sleeping.
Oh, okay, good. That's his parrot, a parakeet.
Oh, shoot.
Kim. Oh, you were just in and out. Okay. Anybody else have anything they care to contribute? Okay. Susan, go ahead.
I just want to second that about the pus thing. I mean, that was kind of, at first, years ago, I heard a radio interview with, I don't remember who it was, at work, and a coworker was also listening to the same thing while we were working. And, it talked about the pus. And then I remember, a few days later, I was in a restaurant and I ordered this, Italian dish with cheese on it. And he came in and reminded me of the pus. And I'll tell you, I did not enjoy my lunch. And from then on there, I kind of associated cheese with pus. And then of course afterwards I watched Cowspiracy, and I never touched cheese after that. But so I just wanted to echo that and say, yes, that's something that made me stop.
All right, well, thanks for the input from the other class members. It really is helpful when we hear from our peers, aside from just hearing from some doctor that you haven't ever met or know little about or whatever it might be. Read an article and it doesn't really hit home nearly as much as some personal experiences. Okay, we've spent a few minutes. We've had some fun together. We're going to have Kevin Rogers, who's a fourth-year medical student, talk about fasting. I think you'll find the talk fascinating. He's willing to answer your questions. You can kind of put them in the chat. I'm watching the presentation. You may have to just unmute and say, what about this? Feel free to interrupt him. He doesn't mind that. From what he said before. If you put something in the chat, I'll look at it and I'll try to interrupt him if you're uncomfortable doing that. But he's going to talk about his experiences. I think you'll find them kind of eye-opening and fascinating. More than fascinating, it might even tempt you to jumpstart your health using something that you may have thought was just horrible before. So Kevin, it's your platform. I need to, I guess, I don't know if I have to, but I'm going to make you a co-host so that everything should run smoothly here.
All right, well, thank you. I'll start off with just showing my dinner here. That's the theme that we're doing here for presenters.
Yeah,
but
that's
this is
great. I love it.
This is our Halloween dinner here. So I prepared this before. And I'll give this little, because it is Halloween. And I mean, thank goodness we got over the childhood obesity epidemic and the diet. Oh yeah, we haven't gotten over that yet. But we're still doing Halloween apparently. I don't know why. But I want to give my solution for that because I tried going door to door to get everyone to do healthy things, and it didn't really catch on in the neighborhood. But a solution I found that you may implement with your children or your grandchildren, which is I printed out a map of the neighborhood, and then my wife did all the work as far as the creation of the treats, but she created, a peanut butter date balls and various treats, and put them in a bag, and then we dropped them off at 6 different spots around the neighborhood. So all the children, all the other vegan kids, and come over to our house, and they go out in their costumes and go out at night and go out through the neighborhood. So they get to walk, they get to see the other people, they get to dress up, and they get to collect a treat without getting any negative or unhealthy things out there. So just another option. But that's a squash stew in the middle back there, potato corn chowder on the right, a broccoli, like cashew sauce smothered over the broccoli, and just a raw broccoli and cranberry sauce, cranberries there, and then a quinoa cornbread. All these are out of the Straight Up Vegan. It's one of the authors from, or one of the cooks over at True North Health Center, which we'll be talking about a little bit later here. Just want to share that.
Kevin, I want to interrupt you for a second and chime in with what we use for our Halloween treats. Sure. We actually bought them at Costco. They're little packages of nuts and dried fruit. And then we also have little packages of just fruit, 2 fruit in a thing, no other sugar, just dehydrated fruits. And that has worked for us. Last year, we have over 200 people. And this year, we're doing the same thing.
That's wonderful, because we can still do these holidays in just a healthier fashion. We can still have all the celebration, all the joy, but without the stomach ache.
Glad you brought that up.
I will now share my presentation here. I'm grateful you all are here on this holiday. thank you for lending me your ear. I hope to provide you something that you find useful. I found it indispensable within my quest for health. And we're going
I
to be
can
discussing.
see your screen just fine.
You can see my screen just fine? Perfect.
Yep.
We're going to be discussing the miracle of fasting. The who, what, where, when, why, and how of fasting. As mentioned, I'm a fourth-year medical student, but I was trained before that in natural hygiene, which is the science of health. I just want to kind of preface this that I didn't pick up this information from medical school, unfortunately. They're still behind the times, but osteopathic principles I did pick up in medical school as a doctor of osteopathy, which Dr. Ross is as well, and Bonnie, another fourth-year medical student on the call here, is. And one of the principles that is elucidated within this system is that the body is self-healing. And this is primary to this whole context of this lecture today. If you get one thing from this discussion, recognize that this is the principle to take away. The body is self-healing, self-organizing, self-intelligent. The source of creation is literally within each of us. I take a banana in my body. Edward puts a banana in his body. We both get two different constructs because there's an intelligence operating, keeping this thing intact. And when we cut ourselves, what happens? Without any type of real thought process on our part, trillions of operations occur and we heal. So it's beautiful, but it's essential to the concept of fasting and why it works. The body is self-healing, the body is self-intelligent, trillions of operations orchestrated at one single time. Truly amazing. And just as a preface, I know you've seen this, some of you have seen this before, but it's 30 seconds that reminds us and puts us on a good track. So.
What will your last 10 years look like? Will you be quick enough for a game of tag with your grandchild? Strong enough to embrace every moment? Will you grow old with vitality? Or get old with disease? It's time to decide. The average Canadian will spend their last 10 years in sickness. Change your future.
So I hope that reminds us all why we're doing this, why we're at these classes. We all want to have vitality and feel as young as possible for as long as possible, even into our experienced age. And so fasting, I think, is a fantastic tool to have in our back pocket and a tool to ensure that we make it and have that level of vitality throughout our life, whether it be now or in the future as well. A couple quotes to kind of set the context, because as I mentioned, as Dr. Ross mentioned, topic of fasting isn't well discussed or really well known within the Western culture, even still within the Western medical culture. As Dr. Clapper here points out, when he went to medical school, he was taught that when a patient has diabetes, nobody gets off insulin. In other words, you get a disease diagnosis and you don't get better. You keep that diagnosis and we'll keep treating you and managing and monetizing your illness. Because as Sir William Osler mentioned, he's the founder of Johns Hopkins. Drug companies are not here to bring health to the population, but to scam them on one level for vast amounts of money. It's a sad truth, but it's one that it's imperative, because my goal and Dr. Ross's goal is, Bonnie's goal is to help people get healthy, and we need the truth. As Plato pointed out 2,000 years ago, there are two types of medicine. One for the slaves, in which we suppress the symptoms that they may work again quickly. And then one for the free man, in which the soul is treated. Dr. William Hay at the turn of the 19th century placed it into very succinct, nice words here about the role of doctoring. When humanity becomes wise enough to understand the origin of its own illnesses and seeing enough to correct these causes, then the physician, doctor, will gradually become that of teacher and watchdog of health, not the tinkerer, with the end result of the many mistakes now committed daily against health by the average man or woman in every walk of life, in every civilized country on the globe. I look forward to that day and hope it's soon coming. And fasting is going to play a primary role in that. at bare minimum, the general concept that the body is self-healing, self-organizing, and we must work with it rather than try to force it in any direction will be essential. So I want to cover the who, what, where, when, why, and how of fasting. I am curious, who here, by show of hands, everyone put their hands up, who's gone 12 hours without food? Everyone gone 12 hours? That's just like if you went to bed at 7 and woke up at 7, you would have done it. All right, good. How about 24 hours? Hands still up? Okay, some hands are still there. How about 48 hours? Got any 48 hours? Arun, okay. I'm trying to go through this and keep up. Anyone 3 days? Dr. Ross, you can see the whole group?
I can't, but I don't see any more hands up.
Okay. Okay, so about 3 days. Arun's got a couple days under his belt. That's good. You'll be able to offer some insight here too. I'm curious if anyone could just volunteer, maybe one person volunteer what they think they might look and feel like after 25 to 35 days of drinking only water, no food. How do you imagine that experience might be?
You mean after I woke up from defensive sleeping after low energy for a while?
Okay, Rob, I appreciate that. You feel like you'd be pretty low of energy.
Well, after 2 or 3 days, probably. There's that. I've done that where you get the high, but 25 to 35 days, there's a point at which I think, well, from not having done it, I'm guessing that I would sleep through whatever the reaction was and then probably be okay.
Thank you for that, Rob. I think it's some good insight there. Yes, you would feel lethargic, but still be alive and maybe okay. Arun, you
Oh,
have your hand up?
Ron,
Yeah, couple of observations. One, after a couple of days, you don't really feel hungry. Second observation, if you're in a cold climate, you get colder much faster. Like I was doing a week-long fasting in Washington, D.C., and I was cold, really cold. But I was doing this with the Veterans for Peace group, and I liked it, and I supported it. And third observation is, after a while, you don't really want to eat. You want to continue fasting. That's all.
Thank you very much, Arun. Those are very pertinent observations. I appreciate that. And I will cycle back to those and may come back to you for an experience point. Again, I appreciate you being able to corroborate some of the things I'm going to say here.
Thank you.
So many people think that it may be a miserable experience, that they may be completely worn out, that they may be exhausted from blinking their eyes. That might be tiring. In fact, fasting oftentimes is more like Arun mentioned, which is quite a peaceful experience for people. Many people report feeling quite elated, even euphoric, and as was mentioned, would like to continue the fast beyond their extended or planned time of a few days. Fasting has been, let's see here. Okay. Well, I wanted to talk here about the fact that when we talk about fasting, I'm going to stop the share for just a moment and see if I can clarify that picture there. Guess not. Sorry, folks. But essentially, we are often told by medical providers who have never really experienced fasting themselves, who often have never even skipped a meal, that fasting is exceptionally extreme, exceptionally dangerous. I've even been warned by doctors that after a few days, you might go into starvation and start to really damage your system and create long-term effects. It's not to say that all medical providers are ignorant of this. We'll talk about some that are knowledgeable about this. There's a center in California called the True North Health Center, medically supervised water fasting, and they're very knowledgeable about this. But vast majority, we're not taught it in medical school. We're taught that anything not taught in medical school is essentially considered quackery. And so most doctors are hands off when it comes to fasting, despite having no experience with it, never seen it done, never read any literature on it. They just have a strong opinion about it for some reason. And I really want to make it clear that just because they don't know about it, just because they have bad things to say about it, doesn't mean that we shouldn't evaluate it for ourselves. And I just hope that you can kind of give this a open consideration. Fasting has been employed for all of history, it seems, going back as long as recorded history goes. And it's a fantastic tool to utilize. And so with that, I want to jump into sharing.
I can see the screen.
Good. As I mentioned, it's been utilized in various religious cultures, Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism. But unfortunately, it's not advertised on our TVs, and therefore the masses are generally not aware of it. We're usually focused on the foods that were advertised and then the substances to treat the conditions we develop from eating these foods. And we're often advertised that these treatments will somehow cure us or make us feel good enough to go on with our life and have a vital life, or at least that's the way the advertisements go. As you can see this man smiling quite joyfully here as he's about to take his heart failure pills. Wouldn't it be better if he just didn't have heart failure? And yet this is what the medical profession is trained to give. So I encourage you to go down a road that's less traveled, but I would almost guarantee that you'll find the grass is quite green on that side as well, and it's worth venturing into. So quick history of fasting here.
The ancient Greeks loved fasting. For one, they used it to prepare for the Olympic Games. Many prominent Greek figures swore by it. As we know, Pythagoras did a 40-day fast. He claimed it gave him more lucidity and physical strength. He also required all of his students to fast. Another well-known figure in ancient Greece, a man by the name of Plato, claimed that fasting was medicinal. Plato is quoted saying, "I fast for greater physical and mental efficiency." One of Plato's students, Aristotle, was also known to fast. Then you can look at the proclaimed father of medicine, Hippocrates. He said, "The natural healing force within each one of us is the greatest force in getting well. To eat when you're sick is to feed your sickness." Plutarch, who thoroughly documented ancient Greece and Rome, claimed, "Instead of using medicine, better fast today." Next time someone calls you crazy for fasting, ask them how crazy these guys were. Many ancient Egyptians were known to fast for 30 days per year. They felt that it would help them uphold their morals. They also saw it as a way to provide the spirit with self-control. The Egyptians felt that it was a form of restraint that could carry over to other aspects of their lives. The Taita and Santhal of Africa had an interesting take on fasting. It is a tradition for the bride and groom to go on a fast before they get married. Native Americans were known to eat whenever they felt the urge, as opposed to having standard meals. They also fasted as a prayer for success before an upcoming war or hunt. Cherokee priests have described the endeavor as a means to spiritualize the human nature and quicken the spiritual vision by abstinence from earthly food. Further south, in the Incan Empire of Peru, fasting was seen as a way to atone for one's sins. In Celtic and pagan societies, fasting was actually a legal means to address a grievance. People would fast in order to protest a specific action. Those being protested against couldn't avoid the faster because they believed doing so would result in supernatural penalties. Pagans also viewed fasting as a way to become closer to the divine and cleanse the body. In ancient India, if someone was in debt, they could fast in front of their debtor to pay it off. Many Indians still fast today during special occasions. The word for fasting in Sanskrit is upavasa. Upa means near, and vasa means to stay. This can be interpreted as staying near the Lord. In the Middle Ages, long fasts were highly valued by the church. It was even a requirement in order to become a saint. Then in the Renaissance, Paracelsus, known as the father of toxicology, was quoted saying, "Fasting is the greatest remedy, the physician within." To add to the list of historical figures who advocated for fasting, Mark Twain claimed, "A little starvation can really do more for the average sick man than can the best medicines and the best doctors." Ben Franklin had similar advice, saying, "The best of all medicines are resting and fasting." It's abundantly clear that fasting has its place throughout history. Many religions also incorporate fasting for spiritual purposes.
So it's kind of perplexing that all these fantastically, renowned folks throughout history are knowledgeable about fasting, and yet modern times, most of us have never even really heard about it in its full context, or employed it, or seen anyone else employ it for any extended period of time. So you might be wondering, who is fasting for? Well, let's take a couple examples here. Arthritis. Let's take a look at the standard practice of care. So if you just get newly diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, maybe you're in your 30s and it's happening young, or maybe you're in your 50s or 60s, and you're getting this diagnosis, some joint inflammation. The prognosis, based upon the Mayo Clinic, this is kind of top tier information in very standardized medicine. You're going to get persistent joint inflammation. You're going to have progressive multiple joint destruction as the inflammation continues. There's a decline in mobility. There's a pain and stiffness and loss of function that really doesn't improve even with treatment. The treatments included and treatments offered within standard medical practice are steroids, NSAIDs, so pain control. We have some immunosuppressives, some DMARDs, which are some disease-modifying drugs that essentially suppress our immune system, make us vulnerable to a bunch of other things. We could try some braces and splints, some surgery. And then we have to consider that these treatment options actually relate to treatment symptoms. Cancer, skin conditions, heart disease. You can see how this becomes a weird spiral where we have a disease process like arthritis, and the medical profession has nothing really to offer except a hopefully slowing of the progression that they expect and symptoms to go with that treatment as we try to slow it. So there's really nothing good to say about rheumatoid arthritis as far as people's prognosis if they come into a doctor who doesn't have any knowledge outside of Western medicine, standard medical practice. That said, there's good news. There's been replete studies on this. I've seen this firsthand myself. In this study here, done in 1991, there were 53 rheumatoid arthritic patients. The doctors were blinded. Patients were assigned to a fasting group, to a control group. And sure enough, after 7 to 10 days of fasting, then placed on a vegan diet for 3.5 months, and then an elimination vegan diet for 13 months total. So they were adding in some dairy products even. And yet, sure enough, all the lab parameters improved in the fasting group compared to the control group. It's quite remarkable to see this in practice. I've seen a lady, she came to the fasting retreat, her hands were just crinkled up and they were not opening with any ease or without pain. And she said that she used to play piano. I remember going into her room to fill her water bottle, her hot water bottle. As our room said, it gets cold. So she used to play this hot water bottle at the foot of her bed at night. And I went in there and I remember her just showing me and just being amazed as she stared at her hands as she was able to move them without pain. 18 days into her fast, she had full mobility without pain. And most practitioners will say 18 to 24 days is around the time span that it takes for arthritic patients to show significant improvement. And then they can maintain this improvement as well. That's the great part. If they go onto a healthy diet and don't continue to cause the issue, they make fantastic improvements and get to see that accrue. Another study in 2001 took a look at 31 different studies, looked at them together, and tried to see, is there a real difference between putting people on a vegetarian diet and having them on a fasting protocol, or just keeping them on the standard medical practice? And sure enough, a fast followed by just a vegetarian diet was proven to be exceptionally useful in the long-term effect for reducing rheumatoid arthritic symptoms. So this should be good news. Unfortunately, it's just not well advertised. There's not a whole lot of money in this solution, as we'll get into, but there's good news for people with arthritis or conditions that are refractory to medicine or drugs. Hypertension is another great example. We have the standard care basically being an option of choosing a variety of drugs. Doctors will give you kind of a lip service to the idea of trying lifestyle, but they won't have any specific training in that, nor do they really have any specific recommendations or any support network usually set up for themselves. I'm grateful to hear a doctor recommended someone to this class, but it's pretty rare that doctors have that kind of setup. So oftentimes they mention lifestyle because they're supposed to, and then they offer prescription pills. not really mentioning the fact that you're going to be on these for life. Like, you're not coming off these. And that's because medical providers don't really expect us to get better. I remember being surprised by that on one of my medical rotations. It stopped the doctor full stop in our conversation when I asked him, "Do you mind if I ask you a question? Do you expect your patients to get better?" And he did a little, mental work of thinking about his patient list, and no, and most times he does not expect people to get better. And that was a shocking discovery for him. Because usually it's the symptoms, we see the same thing happen where we're just increasing the dosages, increasing the prescriptions as the conditions worsen over time. And then eventually become refractory or resistant. And that's in hypertension defined as you having 4 or more meds and still having high blood pressure. But Mayo Clinic pointed out that there's some good news on the horizon. Apparently, they're testing out destroying nerves in the kidney as a solution. It's, to me, astounding how far they'll go down the other line rather than just coming back and saying, why don't we stop causing this thing, rather than pursuing novel treatments like heating up kidney nerves to destruction. And with the current standard of care, I keep bringing these things up because I just want you to, as probably Dr. Ross is well established in you already, not to immediately trust the medical establishment. I could have the best intentions in the world, but I'm not the greatest dancer. And if I step on your feet, it still hurts. So I could have good intentions of wanting to dance well, but it can still hurt. And doctors probably have great intentions. Most people get into the medical profession with great hearts and a great mind, and yet they're just not given the tools or the knowledge base to affect the kind of care they want to. So we end up with 48% of our adults over 18 on hypertensive medicines or having hypertension. Does not sound like we're establishing a great level of care. And this leads to vision loss, heart attack, stroke, dementia, serious outcomes in the long term, when there's a surprisingly very easy to employ, very successful option that has virtually no negative side effects when employed correctly, and it's twice as effective as any drug on the market. You can see the fasting protocol here. That's referencing a study done by the group down at True North Health Center in California there, where they showed that water-only fasting completely outstripped the effects of taking drugs. And it's nearly free to use for the patients, virtually no side effects when well utilized. You can see that just the vegan low-fat diet also outstripped the drugs quite nicely as well. Looking at this graph, there's really no reason why medical providers shouldn't be talking diet and fasting quite a bit before we mention any type of drugs. Just to back it up here, I'm going to breeze through some of these a little fast, but just know you can go back to this and find out that there's replete studies to support the things I'm saying regarding these conditions being benefited by fasting. But in 2001, that team in Northern California conducted a 12-year study where they monitored 175 patients who were diagnosed with mild to severe high blood pressure. Sure enough, at the termination of the fast, 154 of the 174 patients had completely normal completely normal blood pressure ranges. They had a drop of, let me see this here. The average reduction of the systolic points was 46 points. So that's the top number you see, like it's 120 over 80. It dropped 46 points out of the top number and 15 points out of the diastolic, the lower number there, averaging out at 128 over 78, which is quite healthy. And these are people who are coming in with hypertension, either moderate or severe. And after a short fast, they no longer have those issues to deal with. It's just a matter of sustaining that. And that's where the nutrition and diet that Dr. Ross promotes here is so crucial. They did follow up that study a few years later and confirmed it was 68 hypertensive patients. By the end of that fast, 82% of the patients had a significant reduction. The final average was 109 over 71, which is quite a drop. It's useful in cardiovascular disease in just a few days. So while yes, there are some benefits that we'll talk about that are usually accrued over a longer term, a lot of these studies, because there's not a lot of money in them right now, a lot of these studies are only 3 to 5 day fasts. And we still see profound effects on essentially the ability of the body to thin the blood and to clear blockages within the bloodstream. In just a few days, just in 3 days, we can already see breakdown of blockages, of thrombus inside of blood vessels, which is pretty cool to see. We still have a lot of area to go as far as exploring the evidence to prove this, but many practitioners have seen this. Many people have experienced it. We're just kind of waiting for the data to support the things that we've already seen as well. When it comes to cancer, I think this one's pretty amazing. This is where I got really really enthused with fasting. So my first experience with this was I went down to Costa Rica, and there was a 60-year-old couple. Both of them had cancer. She had cancer on the top of her head. He had cancer. He had a tennis ball sized tumor under his armpit. And, I had really no experience with fasting. I was down there for lifestyle and diet at the time, but I was interested in this. And watching that tumor just completely shrink and go away in a matter of 30 days was, miraculous at the time. It's still, life is a miracle, but now I can at least explain the physiology of it. But it was just mind-boggling to watch her scalp just clear up. It was pretty amazing to see. And they're still alive 13 years later now. It's pretty remarkable. And even if you go the mainstream medical route, which is using chemotherapy or radiation, the evidence that I'm showing in this paper here is profound. That it's way more effective if we keep people on a fasting protocol and combine that with the chemotherapy than to have them eating all sorts of stuff that we don't, basically in the medical world, don't even pay attention to, and then just hoping that we can, be eating a toxic diet and then supply a poisonous compound, whether it be the chemo or the radiation. These are toxic things, and think we're going to somehow combine those two. It's a weird concept, poisoning ourselves into health. But if you're going to go the cancer chemo route, it seems imperative that we would employ this fasting concept as well. It seems to protect the normal cells when they're going through this chemotherapy or radiation. So I think it's pretty useful information, even if people aren't willing to go the whole way in and just try a fast as a way to heal their cancer. Which, by the way, the folks coming down to that retreat center, they didn't really, I don't think fasting wasn't their first choice. At the retreat center that I've seen, you usually get a strata of really high performers. So you get your athletes, your celebrities coming to maintain their appearance and aesthetics and improve their sports performance. And then you had really, really, really sick people. And like everybody else in the middle didn't really think about fasting or even consider it. Kind of like when we see diet as well, right? A lot of people will either looking for sports performance or some type of body enhancement, and they will go diet routes. And similar to people who are really sick will also search out dietary improvements. And so these people coming down to fast were an interesting crew because a couple of them were terminally ill. They were supposed to die. They had been given their death sentence by the doctor, and this is why they were trying out fast, because it was a last resort. It was kind of like, what could be worse at this point? I'm going to go down to Costa Rica, see if this thing works. And if it doesn't, I had a vacation to Costa Rica and I'm supposed to be dead in 4 months anyway. He went on to live. He's still alive today. He still sends me messages. He still occasionally eats out at very unhealthy places, but he got the general concept. And that, I think, is what I hope you take away from this, which is, again, that the body is self-healing and self-organizing. We have to learn to work with it. And I'll explain how fasting does that and works with it. But that's our only path really to a longevity and health, is working in synchronous with that life force. It has profound effects on asthma, GI disorders, as you might imagine, when we're giving the whole gum to bum 30-foot tubing a break. Really think about that. From 30 feet from gum to bum is a muscle that is just squeezing for most people all day long, all night long, throughout 30, 40, 50, 60 years of that muscle just going. That tubing and that lining, which absorbs nutrients, is just constantly being saturated, never allowing time for what is constantly happening, the cleaning process, to actually catch up. And so fasting provides a fantastic ability for the gut system to heal. Mental health, we've seen fantastic results with schizophrenia, with depression, heavy metal elimination. People concerned about glyphosate in the potatoes and other plant matter as well. It's amazing. People have glyphosate in their bloodstream and in their urine content before the fast, after the fast, no glyphosate in the urine. Pretty amazing to see that kind of cleansing from the body. So who is fasting for? Fasting is for people with skin disorders, systemic acne, ulcers, cysts, cancer, arthritis, depression, mental complaints, chronic fatigue, cholesterol, cardiovascular disease, hypertension, digestive disorders, autoimmune, aesthetics, athletes. Fasting is for really most of us to consider and have as a tool for us to utilize. There's only a few people who fasting is not for, as Dr. Ross may have mentioned there and is available on the Live Lifestyle Medicine site. People with severe kidney disease, or basically kidney compromise where it's not functioning anymore, severe liver disease. Those are people who are, or someone who's severely emaciated. But even if you've got 5 to 6%, 7% body fat, you can still, as some of those athletes did, you can still fast for 14 to 20 days. And I mentioned skin because it's an interesting one to see, because everybody looks like this in that their eyes open up. You can see the difference in this lady's face here, right? This is just after 14 days of fasting. You can see her skin is very much improved. A gentleman that the first fasting retreat I went down to, a gentleman from Southern California, he had what I call pizza face acne. He had acne all down his back. He had it all over his face. He'd been dealing with this for years. I can empathize because I grew up with acne really bad and took all the same drugs he did to try to clear it out. And it never really cleared for me until I went entirely vegan. He similarly had tried a vegan diet, but it still was not clearing for him. After 14 days, he started to look like her on the right there, or sorry, on the left side for you. And then after 24 days, I think he was as smooth as a baby skin. It was pretty amazing to see. These skin diseases were very usually refractory to a lot of these, which is a topic of it on its own. The medical profession has the gall and the audacity to say that they're going to try to cure cancer, but I will point out that they have not cured acne, and maybe they should kind of stepwise, anyway, be able to knock some of the easy ones off. But fasting seems to be a fantastic protocol for skin. You might be asking then, what is fasting? To define fasting, I like to clarify this because there's a lot of modalities, and people mention juice fasting. I see fasting as being a complete abstinence from food. Does not mean you're consuming the juice. As I mentioned, this tubing from gum to bum is consuming a lot of energy. It's consuming a lot of resources in this constant muscle squeezing, in this digestive process. When we take juices in, we're still utilizing this whole system. And the goal with fasting, as I'll show here, is to free up energy that our body may use that same energy for healing. This fantastic intelligence, which orchestrates trillions of operations at the same time, is just waiting for us to kind of get out of its way so it can do what it's always doing, which is optimizing the system, but only in relation to the substances, the forces, the conditions, the influences that we subjected to. We essentially have this, well, I am enamored with it. We have essentially the manufacturer of the vehicle inside here, and instead of going to some tinkerer on the outside, we could just be resorting to this fantastic intelligence, and fasting allows us to do that. So it's not the abstinence of certain foods. It's not the abstinence of certain juice or just consumption of juices. It's not just intermittent fasting, though that is its own concept. I'm talking about water only, voluntary, with sufficient nutritional reserves. It's a very distinct feature that separates fasting from starvation, as many people get confused. Starving means you don't have nutritional reserves. You're pulling from your muscles, you're pulling from your heart tissue, you're pulling from nervous system, you're pulling from vital tissues. Fasting is when you've got enough nutritional reserves and you're abstaining from eating, which every animal across the board usually has some factor of this built in, that they're not going to be able to find food and that the organism is still going to find a way to persist on. And in that persisting on, it's actually priming this organism to go and find food. So as Arun might have noticed, as this body is cleaning house, the senses become exceptionally profound and sensitive. Your sense of smell, your sense of sight is enhanced. As people know, once you break the fast, your sense of taste is enhanced. These are all mechanisms that the body's intelligence is using to prime the body to be able to find food. Better sight to see the fruit, better smell to smell the food, better taste to taste the food. And so no vital tissues are being broken down in this intelligent action by the body. Again, this is a key principle within osteopathic medicine, that the body is self-intelligent. And to separate this difference between fasting and starving, it's very obvious within a fasting protocol when someone is moving from fasting into starvation. As Arun mentioned, when we first start fasting, we usually kind of start with some hunger. After that first day or two, we start to move into a peaceful period where we're not very hungry at all. And then once we actually come out of that period where we actually would move into starving, you'll get ravenously hungry, and that'll really ramp up. And if a practitioner sees this, we're going to break your fast. It's unusual that you would have this ramping up of true hunger if you were truly in the healing process, and if your body still had time and nutrient reserve to continue that fast. So starvation is usually accompanied by a strong sense of hunger. Fasting, not so much. Fasting is usually a peaceful period. It's willingly entered into. It's calm. Starvation, torturous, distressful, not a very relaxing experience, not very healthy. Fasting should be properly supervised by a trained practitioner if you're going to do an extended fast, who can monitor your experiences, or if you've got certain medical conditions, especially, whereas starvation is usually not supervised at all. Again, starvation exhausts our nutritional reserves. The body is now breaking down vital tissue. Fasting employs something called autolysis or autophagy, where we're breaking down morbid tissue, dead tissue, excessive tissue, utilizing our nutrient reserve. We're not touching anything that's vital. And fasting then is followed by a rebound period of feeling improved in health, in well-being, in energy, whereas starvation usually end up with having to learn with irreversible tissue damage. So they're very distinct mechanisms, very distinct operations. I never want anyone to go into starvation. Would never recommend that. But fasting, something to consider, something to employ, and they're very different. So again, fasting is relying on the supreme intelligence of the body. All health really does depend on this, but we're essentially allowing this intelligence to get the biggest amount of space to work. Does that make sense to everybody? Is there any questions about that concept where we're essentially freeing up energy? Because essentially there's 4 types of rest, and on a fast, a true fast, I would like the person to employ all of these factors. So on a physical side of things, we are, well, you can think about this. Standing up requires more energy than sitting down, and lying down requires even less energy, and closing your eyes requires even less energy, because now we've completely relaxed the physical system, and we are now even reducing the amount of sensory input as well during a fast. One gentleman who himself was a health practitioner really understood this concept, and he wanted to employ a fast of complete rest. So he didn't want me talking. He didn't want anyone talking to him. He didn't want anyone bothering him in the least. He went into complete monk mode, eyes closed the whole time, at least as far as we could interact with him, eyes closed the whole time. He just wanted to just rest. So, and it's with this goal that we also reduce the mental stress. So people are usually away from their home, which helps them separate from those concerns, the work concerns, the family concerns, the loved ones who are, with good intention, concerned about what you're doing as you're fasting as well. That can negatively worry you as well. And then we're also physiologically giving the body a rest. We're not utilizing this whole digestive tract. And so this chart here kind of gives you a comparison. Regardless of what we're doing, regardless of our diet, we're going to have to maintain our brain function. So we got that little block for nervous system. We also have to maintain organs and hormones and glands. And so those energy usages are locked in. And really just to elucidate what I'm saying when I say energy, when we go to sleep, we wake up with energy. When we're tired, we go to sleep and we wake up with energy. Energy comes from sleep. It's like a electric battery, as it were, and it gets recharged through this mechanism of sleep, which is pretty miraculous as well. But food is fuel, and food requires energy to be broken down. Similarly, in your car, you could have a full tank of gas, but you ain't going nowhere if you don't have a battery. And so the food actually requires a battery to utilize it. And so comparing a diet that is a standard American diet, that SAD diet, is using a tremendous amount of our energy for digestion, leaving us only a little bit of that green space available for extra energy. We've seen some people on holidays, like maybe Halloween or Thanksgiving, really kind of push that digestion so far that they completely take over that green space, and actually tend to push it into that nervous system, and they pass out after their meal. And they're not sleeping. They are going to wake up and then go back, then go sleep later that night. But the digestive load was so much that the body had to shut off other systems to focus on digesting this material. Conversely, we can alleviate the body of this digestive load when we put on a healthy diet, a high energy diet, as you see here. Fasting takes this to the extreme, though, and takes off all of the need for digestive effort, freeing up all that extra energy for the intelligence of the body to utilize for healing. So that's why we're relatively trying to rest as far down the scale as we can. And so you might be asking, what does the fast really do then? Well, it's kind of funny because a fast doesn't do anything. A fast just sets the conditions for the already operating intelligence to do its already operational work, which is striving for the highest level of health possible. But again, it's always limited by the substances, the forces, the influence, and the conditions that we subject this intelligence to do. So again, I want to encourage us to think about that and reflect that the source of life is literally within us. And my goal then, therefore, should be to work with that force of life. I don't know. I guess still tripped up on it. I realized this a while ago, but it's still amazing to me that each of us has a source of life within us. If you ever have a low moment or feel a little depressed, just recognize that the source of life is pumping within you and thinks you're worthy of a breath and life. So I guess the rest of the world doesn't matter as much about opinion-wise when that one's rooting for you. What does a fast do, you might ask? As I mentioned, sorry, where to go to fast now? We're into where to fast. Well, I would recommend leaving your home. If you're going to do an extended fast, it's nice to go to a place that takes care of you and looks after your functions and make sure you're not running into any concerning areas. This is pictures from a fasting retreat center that I used to go to down in Costa Rica. It's also great to surround yourself with nature and have those warming and welcoming sounds compared to the dissonance of a city. And this is a picture from the True North Health Center. And so these are the people out fasting. It doesn't look too bad. They're actually kind of relaxing there out on the poolside, and fasters will still sometimes go in the pool, often not times in the hot tub. It's usually too much of an energy change on them, but they're usually able to still walk around, still able to enjoy themselves, not usually doing a high levels of energy output, but they still have some energy to enjoy. And it's nice if you go to a retreat center like this because they'll have a space to educate as well. So you go on this fasting retreat, and yes, you think, okay, I'm paying these people $3,000 a week or whatever it is just to watch me eat nothing. Sounds a little funny, but a fasting practitioner that's doing the due diligence, like those at True North Health Center, will fill that day of yours with educational opportunities. So you can go into a fasting center, get the benefits of fasting, and simultaneously almost get a crash course in health and lifestyle, so that when you come out of that fasting center, you're invigorated and empowered to maintain the health that you've accrued over that fast. And also these centers also refeed you as well, because that's an element that I'm not really getting into in this fast, which is how to properly execute a fast. But refeeding is its own element as well. Coming off a fast, if you've not been eating for a week or 2 weeks, the longer you've been off, the more conscious you need to be as far as the refeeding period goes. Some people have gotten themselves into trouble not eating for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then they have a burger. That's not the way to go. It's way too hard of a digestive things, and people have actually wound up in serious consequences by breaking fasts incorrectly. The long and short of it, without getting too much into it, is you want to break a fast with something easy to digest, watery, so fruits, melons, usually are the protocol. When to fast? Well, when to fast is whenever you're really feeling tired or run down, not feeling like oneself. For me, feeling acutely ill, if I had chronic disease, I would fast. I tend to employ fasting more readily and more upfront because I don't want to employ fasting in the long run. The goal of living should not be to fast. The goal of living healthfully should be to live so healthy that you don't require a fast, because fasting is an extended period of cleaning out. And if I don't accumulate a lot of toxins, and if I leave space for toxins to clear out through my lifestyle, then I won't accumulate a need to fast over a lifetime. That said, if I ever end up with which I do occasionally, especially in medical school, I would run myself down and not get enough sleep, and I would end up with symptoms. That's expected. I didn't give myself enough time to properly eliminate. My body then decides, okay, you're not going to give us time. We will force a time. I will precipitate extra elimination, Kevin, and now you have a cough and you have a runny nose. If that ever happens where I start to get symptoms of extra elimination, which is a normal, healthy process, I'm grateful that body is protecting me. I will implement a fast. I will stop consuming food, and I won't consume any food for 24 hours or 48 hours. I'll just consider water, and it experientially for me, it makes the experience much easier to handle and much faster as far as the recovery period. I do implement the same with my children. That's been how I've employed it. Generally speaking, excessive eating leads to the need for fasting. This is a gentleman I knew who used to look like this prior to changing his diet to entirely off the vegan diet the other way. But it's this type of eating pattern that leads to a need for fasting. But the goal is to live a lifestyle that doesn't require fasting. But if taken earlier, it will jumpstart the healing process and not allow things to progress into chronic conditions. So as long as necessary, as short as possible is the goal with the fast. So you might be wondering why fast? Immune function enhanced, increased kidney function, autolysis enhanced, damaged cells repaired, inflammation reduced, gut flora enhanced, increased awareness, weight loss, improved movementation. So how does fasting happen? You may have kind of picked up on it as we've kind of hinted at it as it goes. Essentially, it's this process of autophagy. So remember, the key point is the body is intelligent and self-healing. And in this intelligence self-healing process, we have something called autophagy. And I've kind of hinted at it, but here's a little bit more explanation for it.
The word autophagy comes from a Greek word meaning self-eating. Auto means self, and phagy means to consume. In modern medicine, it is the name for a process in which our body cleans out damaged cells, recycles proteins and other cellular components in order to regenerate newer, healthier cells. In 2016, biologist Yoshinori Ohsumi was awarded the Nobel Prize in Medicine for his discoveries of mechanisms for autophagy, a study into how cells detoxify and repair themselves. And his work has reignited an interest in fasting, a practice that stretches back into antiquity.
So this knowledge is becoming more aware. This knowledge is becoming more known to people, and yet it's going to take a while for it to really catch on within mainstream medicine, if it ever really does. But we can still employ it. And so, quickly looking at just a couple of days here, the first day we're still coming from our own sugar supplies within our body. Our muscles have it, our liver has it. And then as we start ramping up into day 2, the hunger starts to go down a little bit by the end of day 2. We have increased autophagy of these tau proteins, the amyloid proteins, Lewy body proteins. Maybe those proteins ring a bell, but those proteins are the ones associated with dementia, Alzheimer's. And in just 2 days, we already see reduction of these proteins. Day 3, we start to reach into peak autophagy, again, consuming these proteins. We're also on day 2 mentioned here that we start to increase mitophagy. This is just a fancy word for saying we're reutilizing old mitochondria, and mitochondria are just the energy or the batteries of our body essentially. And so we're replacing those batteries. You might think that would improve our energy function. It certainly does. We have decreased insulin resistance, decreased fatty liver, because now we're starting to pull fats out of the body and utilize this as fuel. Well, we're pulling the excess fats, the ones that are surrounding our liver, that are surrounding our organs, essentially cleaning out from the inside. And as that hunger decreases, we start to enter day 3, where we're reaching peak autophagy, and this process will continue. We don't really increase the rate, but it stays peaked out and continues throughout the fast. And you see continual reversal of chronic conditions, improvement of immune function. Basically, parameters across the board seem to move towards the positive. Only a couple transitory ones don't, as mentioned by Arun. Our metabolism slows down, so we do feel more cold. We do have a slower heart rate, a lower blood pressure, but for some people, these are what we're aiming for. Does fasting really ever cure? I would say no, not in the true sense. Only because fasting just sets the conditions. Nothing ever cures outside of you. The force of life within you. That's the only thing that ever cures. We can just kind of approximate things, get things close enough. We put the bones closer together, and then the body heals them together. The body is the one that does all the work. And so continually, I'll hit back on it. It's the substances, the forces, the influences, the conditions that we provide. We're the farmers taking care of this field, and we provide all the nutrients. The flowers just happen. Flowers happen if you provide the right environment. And so it is important to also recognize that fasting can only do some things. It cannot do everything. It's not a panacea. If I cut the tip of my finger off, I will regrow the tip of my finger. If I cut it off at the base, I have what you see here. I have a nub. So there's a limit to the body's ability to heal within this plane of 3 dimensions. In this life area, there are limitations. And so the body can only heal to a certain degree. But if we hit this fasting protocol early enough, if we start to recognize the symptoms of disease early enough, which I'll mention, the symptoms of disease are much more ubiquitous than we give them credit for. But feeling like rolling over instead of rolling out of bed, you're tired, you're sleep deprived, and you continue this thing, that becomes an issue. And not feeling well or feeling irritable, these are all signs to me that you're not on top of your game. There's things to attend to. And fasting can sometimes be that thing we do to jumpstart ourselves back on the right track, feel like ourselves. A 12-hour, 24-hour fast. If we're really feeling out of it, really feeling ill and accumulating disease, then a long-term fast is certainly appropriate. But I want to toss out the disclaimer. Again, it's uncharted area. It's like walking into a forest you don't know or a jungle you don't know. You'll have far more success if you just take a guide. So I would highly recommend you find someone who's going to walk you through the process, so you're not concerned about the headache that you develop on day 3 or the nausea you develop on day 5 or the diarrhea you have on day 10. These things can all be placed into context, and you can feel relieved that, oh, this is quite normal. That's to be expected. You're going to feel a little lightheaded if you stand up too fast. These are all things that you get made aware of by a practitioner and are looked out for by a practitioner as well. So again, the main thing to take away from this is the body is self-healing, and that through fasting, we can increase this intelligent orchestration of autophagy, where the body uses old tissues, excess tissues, and clears them out towards our betterment of health. And we just keep seeing improvements during the fast. So that's the end of my talk here. If you have any questions, I'd love to hear them. Any concerns? Anything else to say?
Have one.
Yeah, go ahead. Let's see. Nancy has a hand up, and who is speaking?
It was me, Marcia.
Marcia, go ahead. Marcia first, then Nancy.
Okay. Yeah, Kevin, earlier today, you was talking about the father of medicine or the founder of medicine. He's saying when he's sick, he don't feed the sickness or something like that. Does that mean if you're sick, you shouldn't eat?
That's
or
what
he doesn't eat?
That's what he was saying back then. It was 2,000 years old quote. And to put it into context, I would say, and Dr. Ross, I'd be curious your opinion on this, but my honest opinion on this is yes, most people shouldn't be eating. These people and not to say across the board, if you've got some sniffles, you could continue eating. It's not to say you can't. But my thought process is my body is now working on something, and do I need to continue working on something else? As full-grown adults, we really aren't building structures anymore, particularly. We are still recycling and maintaining, but we're not growing at the fast rate of children. And so our nutrient need isn't as high. Our demand is not nearly as high. And so we're able to go 24 hours without food and really have only positive benefits. And so I utilize this thought process for myself in acute illnesses. And then also when I see people in the hospital, you're seeing people who have heart disease. I mean, Dr. Ross is seeing this as well. You're seeing people with diabetes, heart disease, all sorts of conditions, and they're sitting in the hospital just after a surgery, already eating, mashed potatoes with gravy and steak. And yes, those people would be way better off not eating. I think I could take a good chunk of people out of the hospital by not feeding them. And it's a weird concept, but how many people would be improved by not eating as often.
Right. So like if you just had the flu, then that would be okay to maybe keep eating, or are you really, because I know I want to eat even if I'm sick.
And again, you can do it. I just think fasting is something that people shouldn't be afraid of, and they should be something they should be able to explore and to experiment. So I give you my experience with fasting and how I use it for acute sickness, but you can try it. You don't have to try it, but it's something that we shouldn't be afraid of. It's something we should be knowledgeable about and be told that this is an option, and it might be a very useful option that you find quite beneficial in your life to speed up those recovery from illnesses. I didn't get into that type of literature, but even breaking bones, fantastic recovery rates, almost twice the rate of recovery as far as bone fracture compared to people who are consuming normal fare.
Oh, okay.
So the way I think about it is the body's working on something during a healing crisis. Why am I burdening it with something else? Unless it truly,
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for the question, Marcia.
Nancy, then Ken, and then Joan. Nancy?
Yeah, so it was kind of funny. I've just been listening to a book about, well, I guess they call them the Troubles during Ireland, and these girls got put in prison and they went on a fast, well, maybe to the death, to get released from prison. And I don't know, I think they were fasting like 60 some days. And then afterwards, they were having some eating disorders after that. So I guess that's something that maybe something to watch out for. But anyway, I was just wondering if you're just doing it on your own by, without medical supervision, what is the longest you can fast safely?
It's a great question, Nancy. And fasting has been utilized to help people with eating disorders. That said, it is consideration because starvation is very different, as Nancy mentioned there, and starvation can lead to some serious issues regarding food and the mentation around it because you're depriving yourself, not intentionally or purposefully or without that context. As Nancy mentioned, that's kind of a stressful context to be doing it, whereas fasting is done willingly in a peaceful environment. You can break it at any time. The food is there for you if you want to. It doesn't really develop those type of neuroses usually that help to heal them. Now,
well, one of the things they were force fed, which
okay,
I think was probably very traumatizing. So that's probably a confounding issue, you might say.
Yes, that's a very confounding issue. I hope no one's fasting experience is ever that traumatic. And so how long you can fast, that's a great question on your own. I would recommend personally, I have never seen any danger in people fasting 1 to 2 days, especially if you have no health conditions that are major. But that said, it's water fasting. I've seen people get into serious trouble when they try to go dry fasting, which is essentially no water. They think they're increasing the effects, and you will notice that your pee gets exceptionally dark very quickly. And people think that's, oh yeah, now I'm really kicking out the toxins. This is confusing to me because the body's solution for pollution is dilution. The body's main way of eliminating toxins is through the urine. And so it makes way more sense to keep water on board during this fasting period. And that's why we see people able to water fast for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 days, but no one's ever dry fasted for, I don't think anyone's made it really over a week or two. Like, it's really hard and toxic on the kidneys. And so dry fasting, don't even consider it. Water fasting, 1 to 2 days, you're very safe. 3 to 5 days, I still think you're very safe. The only consideration, though, is that if you don't have the experience of having seen it, you don't really know exactly what it looks and feels like. And so some things, depending on your condition, depending on your history, may confuse you or throw you off your path or scare you. And that, some people are still passing bowel movements at day 10 or day 14. Some people are having dry heaves. Some people are having headaches. Some people are having skin eruptions. These are all signs that the body's vitality is very present and at work. We don't fret when we see a child or a baby erupt into skin condition. We know that's a very healthy system doing what it does, which is it's got enough vitality. It's orchestrating a healing event and kicking out toxins, and it'll do so very exuberantly, whether it be vomiting or whether it be skin eruptions or whether it be spiking a fever. children show us that vitality, and during fasting, we also see that vitality come about, and sometimes that can scare people because it gets misinterpreted as something other than what it was, which is actually what you're asking for, which is the body to take the opportunity to deep clean and get things out. So I'd say 3 to 5 days.
Okay, Ken.
Mammals, including humans, females, at I use the word parturition, but I mean birth. When a female's giving birth,
Yes.
if she hasn't got enough energy, she'll go into ketosis, and that often kills her because ketone bodies aren't too far different from acetone, which is fingernail polish remover. And I wondered, do you have to the people that do the ketosis diet or whatever that is?
Yes.
They want to go into ketosis, so I always thought that's kind of dangerous. What do you have to say about ketosis?
Sure. Great points, Kenneth. And the reason that I think, is my understanding, the reason most of these people are wanting to go into ketosis is because they're looking to actually get the benefits of fasting without fasting. They're looking to derive these autolysis benefits, the autophagy benefits, without actually going into a fast. They think they can maintain like essentially a walking fast. I don't see that actually working out. They end up with low energy and carbohydrate cravings. But as far as the ketones within the body, yes, Kenneth, it's documented. It's actually how most fasting centers, various urine strips, it's kind of how we can tell you've actually entered into that true third phase of fasting where you're not on your reserves of sugar anymore. You've gone through that short period of protein usage, and now you're on to fat as the primary source of fuel. Ketones will be a marker of that. And it's not a negative in the short term as far as the health that we've seen, as far as the studies go, as experientially. But there is a consideration as far as the effects. As you mentioned, it's like acetone. Ketones have an effect, and I wonder about this within the ketosis diet, but ketones have an effect similar to alcohol as far as the modifications of people's awareness and of their self-awareness. And so you see a lot of people on fasting retreats will have spiritual experiences, which I'm not going to discount, but the sense of grandeur and the sense of conversationalism sometimes gets a little interesting, which upon reflection, they can kind of recognize that there's a little difference. So definitely the ketones affect our mentation. They're not the healthiest thing to live on. I wouldn't want to live on ketones as a primary source of fuel, but it's part of the process that I think naturally it happens, as you mentioned, with all mammals during a fasting protocol.
We could go on longer, but we have, let's see, we've been over an hour and a half, but I want Joan to be able to ask a question. And then next week, we're going to be doing, I believe it's an open forum. We'll have time to continue on and clarify whatever you don't get clarified this time, hopefully. I think you'll be here next week, Kevin.
God willing.
Okay. Joan, one last question, and then we're going to take a break.
Okay, suggested reading.
Oh, great question.
This is one of the first sessions that I have noticed that we started with 26, 27 people, and we ended with 26, 27. No one left, which shows me that this was a topic that was really of interest to most of you, or we had this excellent speaker who was able to keep you all engaged. So kudos to you, Kevin, for keeping everyone engaged. And go ahead and answer Joan's question.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the question, Joan. This is a fantastic book called Fasting. It's by Randy Fredericks. It's called Fasting, An Exceptional Human Experience. If you want a book that is replete with almost every single paragraph having a citation attached to it and a study attached to it, this is the book that'll go through the whole gamut of what fasting is. She does a great job of this. I really, if I had to get one book on fasting, this is the one book I would get. It's hard for me to say that only because my mentor and my mentor's mentor was this man, Dr. Herbert Shelton, and The Science and Fine Arts of Fasting. I would highly recommend this. Herbert Shelton, a gem, medical doctor who, like Dr. Ross, saw the light of lifestyle medicine. And he supervised over 40,000 different fasts and really has a fantastic repertoire of fasting information. Dr. Joel Furman's Fasting and Eating for Health is a great one. I'm trying to find, I gave you the ones that are more affordable. Fasting, I wish it was, I don't know, I've got about a dozen books on fasting here, it looks like, but those are my favorite. Fasting Can Save Your Life is a good one, but it's like $70. It's hard to find. The ones I gave you are pretty easy to find, maybe $25, $30, but to me, they're indispensable wealths of knowledge.
Thanks for the list and thanks for tonight's program.
Oh, you're very welcome, Joan. Thanks for giving me a little bit of attention on this topic.
And thank everybody for attending and all the questions. And Kevin, thank you for a wonderful presentation. And with that said, we're gonna sign off. And let's see, we're gonna be seeing you next week. Perhaps. Anyway, hope you have a
Sounds good, everyone.
week.
Go to health.
Go, very, very good.
Go to health. Yeah.
Good for Halloween.
It's good for Halloween. I thought so.
All righty. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.